Hey, once again it's me. In a previous video we talked a bit about different forms of pluralism that are out there, and I covered the major categories of convergent, this convergent pluralism, and non-convergent or divergent pluralism. This time around what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about critiques of pluralism. And why don't we start with the convergent style, because this is probably the one that's more critiqued of the different forms that are out there. John Hick is probably the best articulator of this position. He provides something that he calls a religious view of religion. It's actually more of a philosophical view of religion, if you will. The basic idea in Hick's convergent pluralism is that you have this absolute reality, the real, capital R, and this real has a phenomenal aspect, the aspect that we experience, and a noumenal aspect, the aspect that we can never touch, this real that's ineffable and in and of itself, it's something that you can never quite get to. Hick says that the different religious traditions are basically culturally mediated, historically culturally mediated responses to the real. You're going to have personalistic responses where the real is viewed in some cases as personae, that's the Latin term that Hick uses, and impersonae by other traditions. Say, for example, Buddhist apprehension of ultimate reality as emptiness, or the Hindu notion of a nirguna Brahman, which is ultimate reality without qualities. That's something you'd find in the Advaita Vedanta tradition. Those would be examples of impersonae. Or philosophical Taoism. The Tao is flow, it's process. On the other hand, you have Abrahamic traditions that would tend to look at the real through the lens of personhood. God is not what, God is who, right? This is a God who interacts with his people, and it's something that occurs throughout history, and God's handiwork is, the fingerprint of God is visible on all of creation, and so on and so forth. This is a God who wills, judges, creates, relates, loves, punishes, everything like that. So personae, impersonae, this is part of Hick's paradigm, basically. So different cultures, different traditions are going to have these various ways of apprehending the real. And for Hick, these are all more or less equally legitimate ways of doing it. And his argument for that is basically that when you look around you at the different religious traditions, you see that there's kind of this top layer, the elite layer, where you're going to have some saintly type people. Then you're going to have a very large middle where you have just the normal Joes. And then at the bottom you're going to have the people who are not so good. And this kind of bell curve, something like it seems to be visible in all the different religions. And so if they're producing things, saints and regular folks in roughly the same proportions, then maybe they're roughly legitimate. So that's Hick's quasi-empirical argument, if you will, for his paradigm. What do you think of this? Hick got critiqued really heavily by S. Mark Heim in Heim's book, Salvation's Truth and Difference in Religion. Himes focused his attack on Hick's book, An Interpretation of Religion. And later on, Hick wrote a book called A Christian Theology of Religions that includes, at least in part, some responses to Heim. But anyway, Heim's critique of Hick and the convergent idea is basically, number one, it's not really pluralism. So there's a hypocrisy that's inherent in the convergent position. The hypocrisy is, you guys claim that you're pluralistic, but you keep on talking about this oneness, this unity. Everything is moving toward the same thing, or everything is powered by the same essence, or whatever. How exactly is that plural? At the very basic level, your model is not pluralistic. So where's the pluralism? Also, Heim tends to think that because Hick has kind of stood outside all these different traditions and built a paradigm that incorporates them, really what Hick is doing is plugging all these different religions into this paradigm. And how is that different from inclusivism then? Again, not pluralism. This is crypto-inclusivism. Basically, you're saying that you're pluralistic, but in truth, you're actually sneakily being inclusivistic by creating a bigger paradigm to fit all these different religions in. So those are two really strong critiques Along with that, you have the idea basically that the convergent position, by claiming a common essence or common goal or something like that, this is a claim that's usually made by people who have not deeply practiced many different traditions. They know maybe their little corner of the spiritual universe, and now they're making claims about these other people, and they don't really know what those other people are teaching. They haven't really deeply studied, deeply understood. So you have the Christian, for example, who says, oh, we're all talking about God, each in our own way. Are we, though? I mean, would a Buddhist who is philosophically inclined, who doesn't really want to do with the folkloric, theistic aspect of Buddhism, would that kind of Buddhist agree that we're all talking about God? I would say not. Probably not. And would a philosophical Taoist agree? No, because the Tao is not God. I mean, when you talk about the Tao in its different forms, and you listen to traditional Christians talking about the attributes of God, you do hear maybe some things in common. There's room for dialogue here, absolutely. But generally, when these folks talk amongst each other, that's not the language they use. They don't use some kind of watered-down neutral language. They have very specific language to talk about Tao and God. So the devil is in the details. We start off wanting to talk about common essence. We want to have these general commonalities. And ultimately, when you get into the specifics, as you must, if you're going to relate to people over a long time, you're eventually going to get into the details, aren't you? Just like with a marriage. You may start off, two spouses may start off loving each other for these very large general qualities that each has. But over time, you get certain realities, don't you? There's morning breath, and how you handle your budget, and different ways to wash the dishes, and how you put the toilet paper on the little holder for the roll. These are the specifics that do start to come out and do actually start to matter.